No, I'm Mike Burrock. I'm the founder, CEO of Measure.io. And wanted to talk today about how SVIP has really driven our growth and where we've come to as a result of SVIP. We came into this year really with a focus on capabilities development and research, driven by NSF, SVIP, other folks on that side, a little bit of commercial context. But it was really two aspects of SVIP that have put us on the trajectory we're currently on. One was working with the Science and Technology Directorate around extraction of information. Like, how do we take all the mess that's out there from like scanned microfiches to news articles and actually turn that into structured and linked data based on the semantics? The second aspect of that is actually working with US Customs to go through and provide verifiable credentials and provide the ability to modernize trade, especially around agriculture, and to identify other key issues there. That's put us on a path where our monthly recurring revenue is going to go up by 10x from January to January. That's a pretty fun stat to throw out there as a founder. This is really from an external factor, right? We got two really cool capabilities driven out by SVIP. That was combined with an artificial intelligence agent that we developed and started deploying last year. Alongside that last year, we started to see enforcement by US CBP and similar legislation to go into effect around forced labor. And this is the first time that regulations have forced the importer of record to go back and actually accurately know their supply chain back to raw material. It puts our suppliers, our importers, anyone who's dealing with cross-border trade in a bit of a conundrum. They have to go through and verify their supplier's compliance and all of the suppliers back up the chain. When they actually have a container held, they've got to take the mess of information that they have in all sorts of formats and go through and identify exactly how did it get there, and do we have the evidence to show that we weren't using forced labor, right, or weren't using conflict minerals. And once that data is there, they want to know what is actually impacting their sourcing. How can we go through and identify these problems, whether it's a labor issue, whether it's an environmental issue, before that actually happens. Today, people are tackling this with rooms full of people, and it's just not working. We've been able to go through and deploy an artificial intelligence agent that replicates the process of a smart supply chain analyst or an intelligence analyst to go through and research these supply chains comprehensively and provide that information directly back to the customer in the tools that they already use. What we mean by that is that I've got to click play evidently, there we go. What we mean by that is that we're tying this directly into the ERP or into the brokerage platform or into something like Power BI and getting that information into the tool sets that are already in the enterprise. And we're doing that using verifiable credentials, using the W3C spec and linked data. This provides us the ability to attach deep semantics when we provide the analysis over exactly what's going on in a supply chain. For those that don't have an ERP system, we provide the simple ability to drop on something like a bill of lading and maybe some other docs that they have around a shipment and automatically go through, analyze that data, and then provide a comprehensive report that either provides the equivalent of a credit score for a particular supplier and product and deeply understand what's going on there and any risks attached to that, identifying all the actors that are known in the supply chain, and then that score can be monitored over time. When a container's held, we can go through and actually analyze deeply every single aspect and product in that container and identify if there are gaps in the supply chain or in the documentation. And we could do this automatically rather than forcing someone to turn over, say, 32 gigs of raw PDFs, which we just saw recently, and identify where the actual cases of forced labor might be. This has been a huge breakthrough because a lot of times there are 30 days of, 30 days best case scenario in order to respond to a hold. Additionally, on the proactive side, we're able to deliver comprehensive reports on exactly what entities in a particular supply chain for a commodity are actually affected by an external effect. This could be warfare, as in the case of Ukraine, an interruption at the Red Sea port, etc. Our system automatically goes through, in this case, breaking apart the entirety of the GAP supply chain from public data and identifies cases of particular or suspected forced labor or use of other sanctions violations, and ties all of that information back to the source data in a verifiable way. Really, what our platform does at the end of the day is it provides a secure and privacy-preserving way to link your public data or your private data as a customer with public information that's automatically discovered and provide personalized answers for your organization. So anyone who wants to talk about AI and actual AI as opposed to, say, deconfliction or something like that, let's have a conversation. Thanks so much.
Can you say more about the public data that you're using and whether you've been able to find enough? Or
yeah, great question. The answer is we really look at two kind of primary sources of public data, right? One is what's called CAI oftentimes, which is commercially available information. This is trade data license from brokers or Suez Canal, et cetera, right? All these cross-border movements when stuff hits the edges. The other aspect is what's called PAI, publicly available information. And this is where our AI agents actually go out and use the same tools that you as an analyst would do and performs Google searches and hits different APIs and then makes decisions about where to go from there. And what's interesting is the amount of information that people think has been deleted from the internet that hasn't, right? That as long as you're crawling properly and using interesting techniques to get around various geographic firewalls and other things like that, you can actually discover a lot. This, however, gets really enhanced when a customer, though, starts to provide additional data, right? When we identify gap and they maybe add some stuff about their tier 2 that they figured out, or some additional, like compliance reports from someone like SGS. All of a sudden, we get all these new entities and relationships that have been extracted from that documentation that can be searched on as well, and it really starts to help build out that picture. So it's not perfect. We can't magic data into existence, but man, it gets a whole lot more accurate than we would expect a human to be able to do in a reasonable time frame.
So, sorry, just a follow-up. So does that mean that as you get a new client, you are adding to your data set?
No. So this is actually a key thing. The shared data for us in our economy of scale is on public information and commercial information that we gather broadly and openly. When we look at a customer's information, that customer's information and any derivative of that customer's information, even if it's combined with public data or like a LoRa sitting on top of an LLM, that's actually locked to that customer. And to the point where we've actually developed this enough where we can deploy it in entirely air-gapped environments, and that's been validated and working quite well. And so this gives us the ability to deal with highly sensitive trade areas, like components for manufacturing of silicone wafers and stuff like that.
So to better understand exactly what the product actually does, so you're taking the client's provided information about their product and bouncing that off of publicly available data to help them glean insights about the provenance of the goods?
Sort of. So really what's happening is we answer those three questions we talked about like the compliance, how do we respond to a compliance request, and then monitoring. And how we do that is when we see information from a customer, we extract 3 pieces of information from that. We extract who are the entities, so who are the actual businesses or individuals or organizations listed in that document, right, or set of documents. We extract any relationships that are described in there, right? So do we have business A talking to business B or purchasing a certain product? We identify those related products attached to that. And then we identify any flags. And what we mean by flags is positive or negative signals. This could be a compliance report or an assessment. This could also be an indication that, hey, there was a report of forced labor somewhere. The system then starts to continuously comb, based on those entities and those described relationships, additional information from the public side and link that all together into a large knowledge graph. And that knowledge graph then is analyzed every single time there's a particular compliance request or a change in posture when new information is gathered, right? So it's really this event-driven pattern that then creates the ability when a new news story hits or 10 news story hits to rapidly assess, is this something I even care about, right? A lot of times it's not, right? One of our first big value cases at Nestle Purina, for instance, was going through and identifying that they didn't need to go pre-order a bunch of wheat gluten when a certain missile strike hit in a port in Ukraine, right? That this was going to be a temporary blip in pricing. That kind of classification of information is just as important as knowing that you actually do have to respond to something. Right?
So in all applications of AI to find and summarize information, you wonder about the accuracy, the veracity, the vulnerability to being fooled. For example, if you have put out a fake report about a competitor using
Yes.
child labor, things like that. What can you say about verification?
Yeah, no, it's a great thing. And this actually has to do, like, we can go back in internet history a little bit, right? And start to think about how some of these problems were originally solved before we became advertising driven, right? And so if you think about some of the techniques that were built out with things like PageRank and stuff like that, these are actually not terrible techniques when you start to focus on what is the quality of information and how much supporting information do we find from quality sources, right? And so there's never a perfect answer, but a lot of this also has to do with when we say AI, most people these days mean an LLM, and that's not AI, right? That's a really cool thing, right? Parlor tricks has come up a lot in conversations recently. Well, LLMs are really useful though for one key thing, which is taking information in one format and converting it to another, right? To make it accessible to other well-known and well-understood quantitative techniques and other analysis techniques. So when we combine those items, you start to get some real value out of this. But on its own, an LLM's not going to answer this stuff for you.
Right, thank you.
On that note, thank you, Mike.
Thank you.